Good afternoon. I want to welcome you with great sincerity to our History Museum of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff. The Local Legends event, and this is our 9th Local Legend event, is one of our major fundraisers every year, and it features some very, very interesting people, and I know you're going to enjoy what you're about to see. The funds generated from events like this help us absorb the cost associated with other programs, exhibits, and certainly managing and utilizing our collection. I'd like to thank our local legends, past local legends. One right in front of me, I know that we have Jim Lowell here. I know Adrian Smith, and if I've overlooked anybody, you're going to see another one momentarily.
Get up the nerves and get up.
Ellen, Donna,
well
absolutely.
For the organization.
And Bill will be out shortly. In addition to that, I'd like to thank lead sponsors for this year's event: Joan Dupree, Scott and Susan Garrett, the Granger Foundation, Tom and Maxine Hunter, it's that young looking fellow over there, and Tish and Tom Hunter, Ann and Rob Krebs, Karen and Alan Lacey, John and Paula Lillard, Lois and Harrison Steens, and Susie and Rob Wood. Also, I'd like to thank, we have many patron sponsors, and they're noted in the program that you received when you came in. I'd also like to go back to our local legends, those that are here, those aren't here. They're all listed in the program and have been a very important part of us building our reputation over the last 8 years. I'd like to recognize the Local Legends event co-chairs, Judy Ingles and Dave Grinnell, and they've been here working away, and I think they're right backstage now. I'd like to introduce and welcome our 2018 Local Legend, Marian Pawlick, and Emmy Award-winning journalist, Bill Kurtis.
What a pleasure to come back in your new digs, and they really, I think, are going to work wonderfully. Marian, such a pleasure to be here with you. We go back a few years.
Yes, we do.
My favorite trustee of Lake Forest College, et cetera, and Shedd Aquarium. And I was just looking down, if you want me to introduce the legends, we have Jim Lowell, who is with us here. Jim, you know, took the picture of the famous moonrise, where it was half moon and he was in Apollo 8 going around the moon. Now that's an inside joke, because at the Museum of Science and Industry, I had the pleasure of interviewing the entire crew, of which Jim was a member, and they all take credit for shooting that picture. Bill Anders was the guy who actually had it. Adrian Smith, who'd you know to get that seat all the way back there by the Adrian Smith? I smile every time. He's the nicest guy, and you'd think, you know, he builds garages here in Lake Forest. Let's see, what would I put down on his resume? How about the Burj Khalifa, the largest or tallest building in the world, unless you've completed one taller in Riyadh. Is that up yet?
It's stuck at 70 stories right now.
And how much higher is it going to be? It'll be the biggest, won't it?
It'll be about 500 feet taller than Burj Khalifa when it's finished.
500 feet. Of course, the Arabs want to be bigger than Dubai, and God knows where they'll stop. Oh, boy. That is a legend. John Bryan, we had a memorial for him yesterday. It was a wonderful memorial for a wonderful man who stands above us all. Richard Marx, a local and very popular singer. His father wrote the intro for the Channel 2 News theme, believe it or not. Then you have a couple that placed second in the Survivor reality television show. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But it's a it's a nice way to find out who doesn't watch television there. And of course, Franklin McMahon. And I just learned after going through his exhibit that he was had to be one of the first courtroom artists. And he has his work in there about the trial of Emmett Till. Can you imagine going back there? And for newspapers, and he would drive down and cover that trial. Ellen Stirling, our favorite fashion designer, and her shop, they wanted me to wear some of her clothes, but I said, Lake Forest, no, I don't think so. I don't think they're ready for that. And Ryan Sandberg, who is seen here in a baseball cap, he's now ready to come out in full air, if you have seen the commercials. But we are here today to talk with Marian Phelps Pawlick. That's not Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer.
No,
but
no relation.
But you could, because you have that lap pool behind your house. Your family has the All-American story that is a perfect start for our interview. It starts in Iowa with the fabrication of carriage bolts. Now, how does a carriage bolt relate to going around the moon in our little capsule? Well, it evolved into the fastener business, which evolved into the aerospace industry. Could you tell us the story?
Well, it's a wonderful story. It's the story of a bolt. Seems like an insignificant fastener. Is that me?
No, it's an out of space.
Well, it's appropriate for the kind of subject. Anyway, it's such a wonderful American story, because I don't know if stories like this can possibly come to fruition in any other country. It's the imagination and the industrialness of the people and the need that they found they had to meet. So my great-grandfather started with the carriage bolt for carriages. I may correct you, it was Berlin, Wisconsin, pronounced Berlin.
Merlin, of course.
He started with the bolt to put the carriage together. And then it evolved through his daughter, who turned out to have a gift of mathematics, which was extraordinary. They didn't have photographs of people in those days, so she became a CPA, known as S. Phelps, and was able to support her, she was a widow, her son, who was my father. So he grew up with this entrepreneurial thought in the back of his head always. He was gifted intellectually and got scholarships everywhere, and graduated from Yale as an engineer. And that's when he put a couple of machines together, got a patent, sold it. That was the beginning. Gradually, he got into the fastener business, which is nuts, bolts, and screws. And did very well, built his own plant, and his market was Detroit with the cars. Did very well. The war came along, and that switched to fasteners in Detroit for tanks. And that again was very good. When he died, my mother, who was a strong woman, kind of supervised the business until my brother could grow up and get through education to get a crack at it. And that was the thought. He came back from the Marines, took over as he could with the idea of the unit. He had 3 guys with him. They were brilliant in their fields, but didn't kind of get along together. So the idea was the unit was going to solve the problems.
Can I explain, having been in the Marines? I understand what you're saying. A unit is a rifle squad of 4 men. Mm-hmm. One is usually the leader, the sergeant, with 3 others. You put 4 of those together, you have a platoon. You put 4 of those together and you have that's a squad, then you have a platoon, then you have a company. You put 4 companies together and you have an assault force equal to none.
Well, that was the thinking behind what he was trying to do.
Once a Marine, always a Marine.
Anyway, he decided that the market was not Detroit, that the future market was the West Coast and the aerospace. So he moved the company to the West Coast, and there they began dealing with fasteners for airplanes, and big planes, little planes, everything. Got a few contracts from Boeing, which was good. Enter the subject of titanium. You have some titanium, I've got 2 knees, great stuff. And that was the perfect material for a spaceship because it was very light in weight and very, very strong. There was a problem. How do you fasten the engines to the spaceship? They couldn't do it. Nobody could do it because nobody could extrude that titanium and get it done. So the unit went to work and sat around, I don't know how many late evenings, trying to figure out how to do it. They did come up with it. They developed the bolt that put those engines on the spaceship. And I'm looking right at you. I love circles when they come around. Well, this is an unusual circus. Anyway, here they were, very, very successful. And the rest is the story.
But you have a picture.
I have
of the now famous
pictures
bolt.
of, well, this is just a small little thing. You think what it did. Here it is.
How big was it?
It was 8 3/4 inches.
Well, that's pretty big.
That kept the machine on your ship. So here we have the story of the boat from a carriage to the moon in 4 generations.
Let me hold it up so everybody.
And that, I think, is the most wonderful American story I know.
Well, that is. Probably none of the astronauts knew that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Don't thank me, thank their genius, not mine. Anyway.
Well, how did you get to Lake Forest?
I was
Lake
born
Bluff?
here. Well, I was born in, grew up in Lake Forest, and journeyed around many places. Came back eventually to Chicago, and really fell in love with Lake Bluff, and that's where we are,
Yeah.
happily.
Do you have the bolt framed up there?
The boat was framed in my brother's house, and he wouldn't let me even touch the thing. It was his contribution, if you will, with the unit behind it.
What are the changes, most profound changes that you have seen while living here a long time?
Oh, that's hard to think. I guess the growth, the diversity of the population. Growth has been steady, not always wise, but on the whole, very wise. Schools have kept up. What I think, as a kid, I knew everybody in Lake Forest. I'm mentioning my age now. But it was Mr. Kittle, Mr. Helander. We knew them all, and we went into the craft drugstore because of the ice cream bar in the back. And we've lost that.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know, the simplicity of that kind of communication is gone. But we were very respectful of them. They were great, and they didn't rat on us when we'd done something bad. They were our friends and lovely people.
You decided to build there.
Yes, we decided, my husband and I, we'd love to build a house. And that having grown up here, I knew of what that property was called Crabtree Farm. I used to go up there and play tennis from an early age. And Mr. Blair was my father's roommate at Yale. There was reason to know about it. Anyway, there was a piece of, one of the pastures was for sale, and we bought it. Mainly because of the beautiful old trees. And I don't know, if you're surrounded by a couple of 100-year-old oak trees, it's a different feeling.
I thought that they were bigger than my oak trees, but certainly the rest that we see. So,
Yeah.
But you have more. You have a prairie, and you're very proud of that prairie.
I love the prairie. That was the whole idea. It was a pasture for cows, cattle, and it had European pasture grass on it, and that particular grass has very deep, deep roots. And you'd have to be if you were a plant and the cows were chomping on you all the time. You'd have to have a lot of resources. So we had to rototill it up to get rid of the pasture grass and reseed. But also up came a lot of seeds that have been buried for, I guess, maybe almost 20 years. And they were still good, and they did their job. So we got things coming up. I didn't know what they were, but the Botanic Garden did, so that was helpful. That was right next door. And then we planted the rest. It's been wonderful.
Well, the beauty about the pasture, I'll just use this moment to brag about my, not pasture, but prairie. If you let it go and burn it every year,
Yeah.
The buffalo came through, and they would eat it down to the soil. And then you'd have fires created by the lightning. And then the Indians would start the fire to clear the grass. And then you had, which we have not had, you had these droughts, and they would kill the grasses. But those three elements kept back the big oak trees and allowed the prairie to come forward. And in order to survive, they had to go deep, 10 feet deep, with their roots. And that may be kind of a personal study of mine, our answer to global warming. Because all those roots, 10 feet down and more, compass plant is 15, eat carbon. And the carbon is eaten by little microbes that you can't even see, but you can hold 1 million in your hand, or maybe 1 billion. They're so small. And the studies are just now coming to the surface, primarily because when you cut down or replant the prairie into corn, you lose the prairie, of course. But they're discovering that there is this incredible bank of roots and microbes that all eat carbon. So it's people are surprised that it's the second largest carbon bank in the world, next to ocean, more than tropical forest. And we've got it here. Actually, we're sitting right on the edge of the Great Plains and prairie, tall grass prairie, that goes to the middle of Kansas, north into Canada, south into Texas. Doesn't cover all of Texas. And that was the pasture of the buffalo. And the buffalo came up here. And so now we are regarded as kind of a rare place with all these endemic species of prairie. Just this sliver that is now Chicago. It's not only onion, but they developed here. And then
I didn't know that.
Went west. So you're sitting on $1 million if you have your house here. Tell us about your parties. Because they're famous. They're famous.
I don't know. I'm kind of gregarious. I guess that's where it starts. I don't know. I've been privileged, so enormously privileged, falling into the nest that I did, to know a great many different kinds of people and wonderful people. I spent a lot of time in Dad's factory where he would show me how things were working, and I got to know those people. They were lovely. And I had so much, I wanted to share it. Simple. And so that's what we had.
Historical figures who might pass through?
I don't know, I thought they all were historical.
They're all historical.
Okay, so-
Well, one couple that I remember in one of these interviews after our local legends was when the, you know, I could remember right up to that moment when I have to verbalize it. The Duke of Windsor and his wife.
Oh,
You can help me on the wife, you know, the American wife. And so he came to a party here in Lake Forest and had a good time, and everybody was thrilled, and then he left. And about a month later, they got a bill for $25,000 for just attending and appearing.
you mean the host?
The Duke, the host, got the bill. Yeah.
I don't have friends like that. Not of stature, nor with rude manners.
But you're a supporter. You're a supporter.
Yeah.
You're a big supporter of conservation, too.
Well, that was obvious with the trees and wanting to reestablish the prairie, which is not as good as yours, but it's getting there. It's got its own beauty, it's unique, and you can have a formal garden, but a prairie does something else.
Well, yours is very thick, it's very developed, and I was there, I think, 10 years ago, maybe.
Come back.
Yeah, well, I will, because it sounds like it's changed.
It's matured. A lot of things have come up that are indigenous that I didn't know. Maybe they were just slow to get reinvigorated. We knew it was a prairie because there was a bur oak on it, which is a prairie oak. That was the signal that it once was that. Also, somebody came by and said, have you ever noticed the configuration of some of your younger oak trees? They're all in a circle, and one is bent. He said, I bet you this was an Indian ground for, maybe not for camping, but for social reasons or something, because trees don't grow in circles. So that was another thought to do it. It was just fun.
Well, fun, but also very, very important, because you're eating
Well, you're
carbon.
just telling me how important.
Yeah. You're eating carbon, which we need. Do you have any other reasons? I know that you had it planted all at once. And was it Mariani who did that?
We had to, they were on the start. They've been around that place for a long time.
Well, we'll sell prairie because you don't have to do anything. Is that right?
That's not true.
I'm the one who doesn't have to do anything.
You have to pull out the thistles and all the other things that are not very attractive and not doing anything except be
That's true,
annoying.
yeah.
And you do have to weed it, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you don't know it.
We used to burn, and I found that the heat of the burning were having an adverse effect on the trees. They didn't like it. So now we mow. And we mow and then mulch and try to make it into natural refertilization in the spring. Doesn't always work, but it's pretty good.
Well, we don't have livestock, most of us, like cattle, to go in and eat down, which essentially is the mower, the natural mower. And that's the buffalo came through and ate that. So that's the symbiotic relationship that we had with animals and the prairie.
Yeah.
I'm worried because we don't have buffalo or cattle on ours. We have let it just grow, and we cut it and burn it. So we'll take tips from you.
I don't think you need tips. I've seen your prairie. It's magnificent and it's huge.
It is. You went to Mongolia. Tell me about that.
Oh, I got a call. I've always been interested in wildlife, and among the interests I developed over the years was with the Crane Foundation in Baraboo, Wisconsin. And they're remarkable, really, what they do in restoring species of cranes that are either being shot or killed in one way or another, and mainly redesignating migration routes which will incorporate water, which they must have, and most of that's going into farmland. So this is their cry, and I've gotten to know George Archibald quite well. He called me up and he said, I'm going to Mongolia in 3 days to try to find this one particular species of crane. I've just had a last-minute cancellation. Do you want to go? So I went. Good company, wonderful experience. Naturalists are a breed apart. They really, they care. So that's why I got to Mongolia.
Brooks McCormick wanted to introduce me to George Archibald, who runs the International Crane Foundation up near Baraboo.
Baraboo.
Right, Wisconsin. And he has literally saved the whooping crane by bringing them back. And so he called and said, "You want to go to
Mongolia.
well, Mongolia, but also to Korea, between Korea, yes,
okay.
the north." And we did, and there with Chinese and Mongolians and U.S. and Russians. And the Russians didn't have enough money to lay out the camping, but they did have enough for a military helicopter that would take us up and fly us around.
Oh, that's pretty good.
We'd come back, and the Chinese would come in with a platter of the fat from a goat that they had just slaughtered. Big chunks of fat like that. And I thought, maybe I'd better skip that meal. However, it turns out the fat was good. And we all should be eating that fat, with the nutrition. So that wasn't exactly Mongolia, but I can't pass up a good adventure.
No.
And we went to Mongolia looking for Genghis Khan's tomb. And there are no roads once you get past about 10 miles out.
Nothing.
And it looked like the Santa Fe Trail with all the ruts. And you drive for 10 hours over the hills. And it's wonderful for livestock and some cattle, but primarily camels. They love their camels. And we found, you're going to say, did you find the tomb? Well, no. We didn't have time to dig, but we found this kind of a secret walled area that something important had to be buried there. But Mongolia, because, it's cold, 50 degrees below most of the year, then turns into this big cattle country, as you know, with grass. And very, 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 very interesting. Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. I loved it. We were really camping every other day, and it was so cold at night. I can't tell you, I've never been so cold. I think everything I had in my bag I had on me. And then it was lovely in the daytime. But the thing I brought home was a sense of quiet. It's so still. There's absolutely nothing. If you sit out there at, say, at dusk, you can't hear a thing. Absolute quiet. I've never had that before. I've never experienced it. I'm sure I never will again. Occasionally, maybe a eagle will screech, but that's all you ever hear.
There's no sign of a civilization. That's one reason.
No, there's nothing. There are no planes. There are no vehicles. There's nothing. Just stillness. Absolute still.
It's becoming very popular now, and it's got so many natural resources.
Yes, it
that you have a lot of people. One thing that we found were digs looking for our heritage. And that heritage was from the natives, the Indians, that made the trip over the bridge, the Bering Strait, and settled North America. And you can see, essentially, the beginning of our Native American tribes.
And I think the Mongolians are, I thought they would look Asian. They don't, they're an Indian. They look, reminded me, well, of course the eyes, because of the sun, are slanted, but the face, that's an Indian face.
They're superb.
Lovely, lovely people.
Yeah, we heard about these superb horsemen. Everybody is a horseman.
Oh, gosh.
And so we went down, and they were having Nadam, which is their big kind of World Series of fights, wrestling. They're great wrestlers. And we said, okay, we're ready for the race. And they had a race which was about 20 miles, and then they would come back. And the jockeys were 9-year-old kids, and with no saddles, and just holding on to the manes of the horses, and off they would go. And they were born, sort of born on back of the horse, and there they were. And those horses became our Mustangs when they came across. But the other interesting thing is that they also were the Genghis Khan means of transportation. And the thing about Genghis Khan was that he united the tribes of Mongolia that are all fighting against each other. And they had 4 characteristics that were really interesting. One is that when they got on back of a horse, they didn't urinate, defecate, drink, or eat on the way to one of their goals. And it was usually someplace they could kill everybody. And they made their way all the way to Rome. And in the museum there in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, they have a letter from the Pope asking Genghis Khan to stop because there's nothing here and God says it. And they said, who's God? You're here. And instead, he took off for the Tatars and toward Russia. But he came up to what is now, excuse me, I shouldn't have had that 5th of whiskey before. Iraq. And came to a large city. And he sent his messengers in and said, look, you have more people behind the walls than I do, but I have just wiped out about 5 cities, and you'll see all my men are on horseback, and they're all riding around your fort. And if you don't surrender, if you do surrender to me, I'll let you live. And if you don't, I'll kill everybody here. He said, you can live, you can, go on. And they, of course, were ruling the world at the time. They were presumably Arabs. And they said, no, we're going to fight. And he killed them all. I mean, several million. And that was his trail all the way into Europe. Probably the greatest world conqueror that we know, Genghis Khan.
I think that's true.
And he took all, this is why we were there, he got all his booty, can you imagine, from Europe, brought it back to Mongolia. And we were halfway looking for it because no one has ever found it. It's got to be buried out there someplace. Unless, and then we, sort of at the end of 10 days, we caught on and with the story that, well, it's not here, you'll never find it because he distributed it among the tribes that he had united and brought together and let them take it home and, ride their horses. So, quite a story.
It's quite a story. There's, speaking of those horses, they're wonderful little animals, they really are. And archery, of course, is not only the sport as well as wrestling, but they were archers, and they developed the stirrup.
Right.
In developing the stirrup with the archers, who are one with that animal, I've never seen such horsemanship, if they could stand up with their arrows, can you imagine? I think I'd be terrified. I'd turn around the other way too.
Yeah. Well, that's how they rode.
Yeah.
And they rode standing.
Yeah.
And one reason I found out is that they said, "Do you want to ride?" And it looked like a comfortable saddle, so I got in the saddle. But right where your thighs are these two big metal buckles that I don't know why they were there, but maybe it was to take a chunk out of the white man's thighs. I could hardly walk when I got off, and but that's apparently why they stand.
Yeah.
Great archers.
Yeah.
Well, they conquered
Going
the
at a
world.
gallop, oh my gosh, I'd be terrified.
Conquered more of the world than anyone else under Genghis Khan.
Yeah. Well, it was a fascinating place.
Well, did you have any sheep's innards? Intestine, sheep intestine?
If I did, they didn't tell me, or I wouldn't have had it.
Well, I think you can get it down here.
I wouldn't order it for anything.
In their round tents. You're quite a golfer. What?
I come from a golfing family. I would not say that I was. My father was an extremely gifted golfer. I think he probably started somewhere he was an impoverished kid. He was on scholarships everywhere, but he probably was a caddy somewhere, probably in South Chicago. Anyway, he loved golf. He did very well. I've got his gold medal from the Olympics.
Really?
And 2 medals as Western amateur. But that apple didn't fall very far from that tree. I tried, but
Well, don't ruin the story, because your reputation is that you've been to the Olympics and you won all those medals.
he won those medals.
You and your family have lived in this area for a long time. What have been the greatest changes that you have noticed?
Well, as I said, it's mostly the growth and what comes with growth, and the lack of camaraderie between the customer and the merchant. I don't know how else to put that.
Really?
But we were very cordial to them. We had to be. That was our way we were brought up. I see sometimes really very horrible examples of lack of manners to those that serve them. And that bothers me. That bothers me. That wasn't the way we were brought up. The difference also is the growth of the Lake Forest College and what it has meant.
You've been on the board there a long time.
Well, yeah. I was here with 5 kids, and I was tired of children's talk. I used to go over there and audit classes just for conversation, something more than the diaper man. And I think Gene Hotchkiss is here. Anyway, I don't know where he is. He's there. Well, he saw me in class, and he said, "What are you doing here, Cubby?" And I said, "I'm trying to get my head back together in a little more abstract way." He said, "Why don't you stop sneaking in and just get on the board?" So it's his fault. I was apprehended.
Why would you advise someone to go to the Lake Forest College?
It's a very fine liberal arts college. I believe in the liberal arts college. Certainly we must have science, but we also must have the liberal arts. Because the liberal arts are the only way to really train good thinking and then apply it to a bolt or something. But I believe in what they're doing. I've had the privilege of knowing some of the professors quite well, and I think they're top-notch.
What a gem to have within the community in these wonderful homes.
Absolutely, and it's always open to the community to enjoy their lectures or anything else. They want to involve the community more than they are able to. I think the student body are wonderful. They're very diverse, which you want. They come from all over the place. They're nice young people, and they're motivated to do something in the world that is creative and good.
Swimming has played a big role in your life. Swimming?
There?
Yours.
Oh, well, yeah. I've always liked to swim because I couldn't play golf. I did swim. And, well, an opportunity came. It was quite amazing. On the golf course, though. I was offered an opportunity to be a reporter for a travel organization, publishing. And the guy said, what I really need is a reporter for a newfangled sport called scuba diving. Go get certified and I'll hire you. Well, so that's where it started. And I enjoyed it. I flunked first. I've spooked, but I got it the second time.
Well, where have you dived? Where have you dived?
Oh, I've been around the world.
Really? No kidding.
3 times, because I had to go back on these big resorts. I could also see what they were doing under the water, and I began to see the repetition, the horrible desecration of the reefs and overfishing and all that stuff. And that's when I decided I wanted to scream about it, but how could I scream? So I got involved with the shed, and we've been screaming ever since. I had to have the big voice.
Well, you were an early warning system. We should have listened.
Well, it's the only way you can get the story out was with the attraction of a live animal. That's when we built the oceanarium. You know all about that. And having the animals that attracts people. And we found with that wonderful architecture of the oceanarium, you get the people in there and you have maybe about 3.5 minutes when they settle down before the whole action begins. And in 3.5 minutes, you can teach a lot about the ocean and conservation of the water. And we had some good pros to do it. That's where it started.
And a lot of challenge, because we now have a new report out that came out a week or 2 ago, where we have, there are several measures, 2 years before we have serious problems with the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
That's right.
It's now over 400 parts per million, which was the danger point that everybody was talking about. It's about 410. Likely to go up to 500 pretty soon. And then 2020 is a year that everybody is pointing toward, that we have to make some changes in reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Have you been following that?
Sure.
Tell me about it.
Well, you mean at the shed?
Yeah.
Or somewhat. That's been more concentrated with under the water and the water situation, which is badly damaged too. But of course that affects it. It's all tied together, not little pockets, they're all together. Not really carrying the flag so much, just more incidentally referring to it.
Well, the latest report is that the reefs of the world
Oh, well, that's affected by it.
will be wiped out.
And that's the beginning of the food chain. So you just think about what that does to the livelihood in the sea, the animals, and those people that live off the sea. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, we're talking about 2 years and then 5 years.
Yeah.
This isn't any turn of the century
No,
prediction.
this is on the doorstep.
And yet, it hasn't caught fire like it should.
I don't know why, but there's a lot of publicity. It's in the paper all the time. It's on the air all the time. I don't know why it hasn't registered. And I don't know what the solution is.
Well, the solution is to reduce the carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And so you can do that by replacing a lot of the corn in Illinois, the largest corn producer, with prairie. Go back to the prairie.
You're
Because
not
the
going to
corn
get the
is-
farmers to do that.
Well, this is the corn, though, that we don't eat. This is the corn
Oh,
that goes to cattle.
feed corn.
Right. So we probably have too much meat and feedlots in the world. But something major has to be done to turn the tide. But it's going to take something very, very dangerous and big, catastrophic, I think, to really push the message home.
Do you
And
have
we
any?
sit here in the most beautiful community you can imagine, under the trees, and nothing seems to be phasing us. But out there, what used to be prairie, now farmland,
Yeah.
is eating up the microbes in the soil that really
Okay, I got you.
got me.
I got you. What do we do about it?
Yes. What do we?
What do we do? How do you wake up people so they'll do whatever we should be? You're going to say you have grow feed corn. That's the cattle industry. It's a very strong industry with a lot of political connections.
$400 billion a year.
Yeah, and that's quite a beast, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think people are gradually changing their diet, but it's too gradual.
Yeah. Too much meat.
Yeah, but I think it's changing. I think more people are cutting down on meat.
Mm.
Big slabs of steak aren't around much anymore. I don't know. Scary.
Deep-rooted plants will actually help because they will give us cleaner oxygen into the air. They'll soak up the carbon dioxide and release the oxygen. But we can't all be vegetarians. We can be more reasonable vegetarians, though.
Yeah, and then you're going to eat all the fish in the sea, and then I'll be sad.
Yeah. Right.
I don't know.
You're quite a conservationist, though. Are these the reasons that you've come to that conclusion?
No, I was getting to that conclusion. They reinforced it. I wouldn't say it was the beginning of it, but they certainly reinforced it.
Isn't it funny we live in this little enclave next to the lake with beautiful trees and beautiful houses, and we can live here all our lives and not realize what's going on out there, but we're the beginning of this tall grass prairie that supported 60 million head of buffalo in its time, before we wiped them out.
Yeah.
And that runs from Texas, as I mentioned, to Canada, and we've taken it down. So maybe we have to have a major conservation. Now, a lot of people are aware of it. You'll have a Green Bay Trail that's running alongside
That's right.
railroad tracks, and they're clearing it out and putting in deep-rooted plants to soak up the carbon in the atmosphere.
But that's just a drop in the bucket, you know. I don't know, maybe if more was taught in the schools, in the science classes, that's the generation that's going to get hit. I don't know, but that might be one way to tackle the problem.
I think it is being taught, and but they're young.
But not
They need,
a lot.
need to be in the positions where they can do something about it.
Well, maybe if they taught that in the colleges, then they would be the future director of that.
There is so much brain power here in Lake Forest, Lake Bluff, that we could set up our own headquarters and go after the problem.
Well, that's something for you to do. I'll help you, but you do it.
Let's put you in a time capsule that we go back and tell us the big changes that you have seen as you have lived here in the community.
Oh, I don't know. I think I don't know. It's changed. It's developed a lot. Of the open lots are all gone. So, is that good or bad? I think it's both. And the Great Lakes is certainly a consideration for all of us, and we live on Lake Michigan, and we take that for granted pretty much. We shouldn't. That lake is in trouble. But how do we tell people about that? It does affect them. There's a constant current that comes down from the north, and it's just gouging away the Bluff and taking all our good sand to Indiana. But the lakes are in trouble. They're changing with the earth pattern and with everything. That's a big change that's going to be more obvious as we go along. And it would be better if we got it by the tail now and discuss what can be done to offset those results. I don't know. That's a huge change just of the topography of the place.
I think we're to the point where forces are rising to where we are going to.
It's going to cost a heck of a lot of money, and then how do you get the money, and who wants to raise the taxes? That's what it comes to.
And when this educated grade school and even into high school, they're being taught.
Yeah, but they're not taught much beyond that.
Well, maybe when
what you want to get them is when they're getting out their first job and they've got this whole thing in their heads.
Yeah.
And then they will mature and get into responsible situations, maybe.
And we'd like for you to vote for a 21-year-old who is just out of college, running for, oh, sorry.
No.
Well, let's take some questions.
It's too much.
Not of me. Yes.
Have Marian tell about riding the dolphin.
About what?
Riding the dolphins?
The shed you rode a dolphin.
I've swum with the dolphins. Is that what you mean? As a diver, which is a beautiful experience. Well, I think you're talking about when we were, a group of us were diving with some photographers. And to get a good picture of a shark coming into you, you chum the water a little bit so his mouth's wide up and you don't get a picture of the tail. We were doing that, and I was handling the lights. I didn't like it much. Anyway, that stopped, and because we were at a confluence when we were in a lagoon, and they could feel the tidal change. Water was going out. And there was one person in the group that freaked, so I suggested, well, I'm going to go out. I can't swim back. I haven't got enough air. I'll go out. Remember to pick me up, and you take her out so she can get out of here. Well, so in the meantime, the water was going out. The waves were coming in because there was a big wind. And who was riding the waves but the dolphins? They love to. They squeak and whistle, and they have a blast. And I thought, well, gee, I'm all out of air. Well, I'll just blow up my vest and have a ride with the dolphins. But I kept thinking about the sharks that we had been to. And the only enemy a shark has is a dolphin. He's got a very strong nose, and he will hit the gills of a shark, which knocks them out, and then they drown. So sharks don't go where the dolphins are. I kept saying, dolphins, come on, let's go. I'm going on a ride with you. It was wonderful, beautiful experience. I'll never forget it. They came and picked me up in this skiff, and the dolphins followed us all the way to the dock.
Wow.
And I just thought, what a beautiful experience with a gorgeous animal.
From here on out, we will call you Jane.
Jane?
To Tarzan. Tarzan Jane. All the way in the back.
It's about your love of music and music in our community and all you've done with that.
Your love of music and the music and art community. All you've done with that.
Well, I started going to the symphony orchestra with my mother when I was 8. She took me out of school every Friday afternoon so we could make the matinee. I kind of fell in love with it. It was an easy thing. And as you grow, you find the music you enjoy grows with you. And I got more involved with all kinds of music. And art, I always dabbled in it, and I was never any good, but I liked it, and I certainly appreciated those that did it well. So that led me to the Art Institute, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And in the other room, you have Franklin McMahon.
Yeah.
Whose pieces are on exhibit. And there was one that struck me was he covered the trial
Yes.
of the killers of Emmett Till.
Yeah.
Had to be. And there they were in what would now be called a courtroom artist.
Yeah.
And apparently drove down with his kids to wherever it was, Mississippi or Alabama. And there it is. That's as close as we'll get to a recording of that trial.
Yes. Well, he was quite a remarkable man. Wonderful guy. All his kids are, too.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to say Marian is a very old and dear friend of mine.
Well, you're an old and dear friend of mine.
And just how old?
Never mind, we don't have to get into that.
The point is, she is still extremely active all the time. She's going here, there, everywhere, and accomplishing more than any of us can dream of still at our tender age. I'm very proud of her.
Well, thank you, Hobby.
And she's here to prove it. There are no other questions? Marian, we're going to wrap this up. And I think we can. I think
I
time
can't
is
hear.
there. Oh, okay.
Well, I too would value Marian as a friend, and she defines graciousness, as I think this entire audience would agree. But I want to know, Marian, what's your secret of wearing waders, going out into the middle of an oceanarium, and still looking elegant?
I didn't get all of that. I got the implication of it.
Looking elegant was
Yeah,
the
I
most
know.
important part. There's a big rock out there. And
That's right.
You don't want to step off of it. Good question.
Oh, gosh.
Someone else?
You were there that night.
I know I was. Was I with you on the
We
on
were
the
all
rock?
out on that rock. It's a wonder
It
that the
is.
police force.
elegant in your way.
I borrowed those waders, and my dress was tucked inside of it. It really didn't look very fashionable.
We were concocting sort of introductions. I was emceeing, and this was
Yes,
early
you
on.
were.
And one of them was, supposedly, that I would come down a rope from the ceiling, which is 40 feet up, splash into the water, and then take off my wetsuit and have, a James Bond white dinner jacket on and start the well, little did everybody to this day will come up and say, hey, I really liked, when you came down from the ceiling. Well, I didn't come down from the ceiling, but a look-alike double did, so that I was able to just walk out from behind the rock and take off
You
my
didn't have to
wetsuit.
tell that story yourself. Here you were a hero. Way to leave it that way.
I'm old enough, I have to reveal it. It's been all these years I've worried about
Oh, dear. It was very dramatic. It was absolutely fabulous. Brought the whole house
it. A
down.
wonderful institution, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you for your contribution and work for it and Lake Forest College and Prairie. I've been a long admirer.
Thank you.
And your beauty.
Oh, well, what am I going to do with him?
Thanks for coming.
Thank you. You're wonderful.
Mary and Bill, if Judy and David would join us, we want to offer a little token of our appreciation.
Thanks, John. Grab this microphone if I may. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Bill and Marian, thank you for your wonderful talk today. It's just wonderful. This is the time when we traditionally do karaoke, so we're hoping we can move right into it. No, we won't do that, but we did want to thank you so much for your amazing life stories, Marian. It's just awesome. I understand you've got a history here in this building in our new home for history. It was a church before, long before it was a place for history. But
Thank you.
You and your family have literally created a history here, which we really, really do appreciate. And on behalf of the History Center of Lake Forest and Lake Bluff, we'd like to present to you this remembrance
thank you.
of our appreciation.
That's lovely. Thank you. It should go to you. It should go to you.
And Bill, thank you for being our MC today. It's been very special for all of us. I'd also like to thank you for your continued support of the History Center, and as such, to present to you a little bit of your legendary place here at the center. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Would you like to have this picture? This is how you got to the moon.
Finally.
Thank you very much.
And this photograph is
That's all it was, little Philip.
my new wife.